Petey Williams is going to lose to Scott Steiner in a headdress on a pole match and finds himself out of the company. And I got to tell you, man, this was disappointing for me. Petey Williams was one of the highlights of my early TNA fandom. I'm not talking about in '02, but I'm saying when I started really paying attention again in '04, that Canadian Destroyer was a revolutionary move I don't think I've seen in my lifetime in wrestling. And now I love the stuff he did with Scott Steiner. And I guess if it has to come to an end, headdress on a pole is just as good of a way as any. But why is it Petey's time to go? Is it just a cost cutting measure and we got to tighten the purse strings?
And what you look, that's another thing. Looking at this time frame, we were by far the most successful from a bottom line perspective. We were running more live events than we had ever run. We always ran them on a shoestring budget, so we were very profitable. I'm not talking about multiple zeros, but the money we spent, the return on investment was high. Merch was a big part of that, so we were making money on merch. We had taken the pay-per-views back in house. Our ratings were good. Our licensing fee was the highest it had ever been, and as it worked into all of this, the investor wanted more and more and more of their money back. So we had tighter and tighter reins. You know, when I look back on it, I think to myself times, and I did this years ago, if they would have kind of just loosened up a little more here and there, but I get it. Panda wanted their money back, and they were getting their money back at this time, and you know, taking the share that they wanted to. So our reality was we had to keep our talent budget, tight. And as a part of that, just like we'll call it churn or the Jack Welch theory of GM, and you know, we would look at our roster literally every month, maybe less tighter than that, and knowing that at this time we're getting pitched from all different kind of guys, and you know, we Petey did nothing wrong, and others that got let go at this time did nothing wrong. We were just turning over talent, and that was he was a casualty of that, if you will. But he did nothing wrong, and others at this time didn't either. It was just churn.
Well, one of the other victims who wound up losing their job here is Jimmy Rave. I know Vince Russo was a big proponent of him. I was a big fan of Jimmy Rave, loved his stuff in Ring of Honor, and certainly saw him in some indies. Another talent in wrestling gone just way, way too
Wait,
soon.
jeez.
Midway is also going to be gone too soon. They're going to go bankrupt here. And apparently, according to some reports, they owed you guys like over $160,000 in video game royalties. Was this a major scuttlebutt behind the scenes when the Midway deal went belly up?
You know, we obviously knew there was a possibility this was not shocking news whatsoever. And you know, when it happened, unfortunate, but in my personal experience, you know, we're in Nashville. Panda and their attorneys, and you know, the original deal. We'll do legal and finance, and the business side of Jeff. You do creative and wrestling. Those rules absolutely came into play, and I knew that Panda was going to get every penny that they possibly could. And you know, you shoot, Conrad, you've been around this kind of stuff. You kind of got to get in line, and I know that we got some. You know, and I remember fast forward years later, um, they were not on. You know, we got what we could, but it was never a major. Oh my God, I can't believe we're not going to get this money. We kind of had the heads up for months and months and months, and we got to pay down on some of that.
There's lots of discussion in the newsletters about, hey, if there's real cost cutting going on, who else is leaving? They say Christian Cage and Kevin Nash are obviously prime candidates to be leaving, but there's other people like Monty Brown who they think is going to stick around. James Storm has said he's committed. If Robert Roode were to leave, it would be as a single. And Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin may be looking for international work. And as we're recording this, What's old is new again, I guess. Because I hear that there was a going away party thrown for Shelley and Sabin at the most recent TNA pay per view or TNA tapings. What do you expect from the Motor City Machine Guns in 2024? Any chance we see them on a Wednesday night, you think?
Never say never. That's for damn sure. Those guys, man, oh man, when they were put together as a team, they just clicked and clicked and clicked, and pretty happy for them. 15 years later, they were still rocking and rolling in TNA. So their talent, the cream always rises to the top. They're going to land. It's going to be pretty exciting on where they do land. They've been together long enough. I can see them having, a successful, we'll call it a independent wrestling tour for 12 months or so. But yeah, there's a lot of upside in those guys. Tremendous amount.
Let's talk about some other moving and shaking. We know that Gail Kim and Christian are going to WWE. James Storm and Robert Roode are going to re-up. It seems like it's all good news all the way around, except for Sonjay Dutt. He's going to get let go. His contract is expiring. You're not coming to terms on a new deal. And it's written in the Observer, with the exception of yourself, AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, and James Storm, he was probably the longest reigning wrestler on the roster. I mean, at this point, he'd been there for more than 5 years. And I know these days, you and Sonjay are thick as thieves for AEW. There's old do-rag Sonjay doing his thing. If you're watching with us over on YouTube, that's my world on youtube.com. But what's up with Sonjay, man? You're not looking out for our boy?
You know what? When I started to tell the story when we were talking about name and pay-per-views, and then I started a few minutes ago to tell the story about Petey Williams. But every pay-per-view, every creative session, at this kind of rhythm of TNA, we would tape every other Monday and Tuesday. And then pay-per-view weekends would be every other Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. We had those off weeks as far as being on the road, but we would, for creative purposes, we would start Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. at my house and go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The guys that were flying out, maybe a Tenay, maybe a Russo at this time. I don't think anybody else was. We would try to wrap by 3 o'clock on Thursday. And then for a while, they just said, forget it. We'll start flying out on Fridays. So it was really 3 days of creative of, 10, 12, 14-hour day. I mean, they were full days completely, but we would break for lunch and certainly break for dinner. But we tried to wrap up around 6 if we could. If you'd kind of get tired and weary. But when we would get in those rooms, Conrad, we would have our 3 whiteboards, and you would have the pay-per-view board, and you certainly had the next 3 months of pay-per-views. And sometimes we had footnotes on pay-per-view 4, 5, or 6 on where we were going. Then you would have your other 2 boards of the television shows and the segments. And, it was laid out there for us to kind of constantly think on that. But before we ever got into the boards, we would have to do house cleaning. And our man, Dan the Man Engler, Rudy Charles, the incredible, I don't even want to call him assistant. He kind of kept the train on the tracks. But we would have to, and sometimes Dixie would relay information through him. Other times it was through others. But we would, okay, we need pay-per-view names. We need, and we would get a mandate. All right, we've got to cut, we got to cut our budget, got to cut our roster. You probably need to let 2 guys go, 3 guys go. And so here we go again, looking at it. So they were all decisions made by the group of, all right, who's going to be let go. And, I think you referenced Christian had been gone at this time and Gail had been gone at this time, but kind of across the board. And you kind of, when you looked at dates, okay, how many dates did they work last year? So that talent is going to want to work at least that many dates, if not more, the next year. And when you start kind of doing the math, you go, okay, this is unfortunately who's on the block nothing that they did wrong. I mean, Jimmy Rave, same set as all those guys. They really didn't do anything wrong. It was just time to move and churn. Again, churn. Conrad, did you ever read Jack Welch's book on the GM dude?
It's unbelievable. I recommend that everybody in business take a look.
Good. Can you give people that are listening to this, because the little nuggets on how he managed people to this day?
He got the bottom 10% every year, just the lowest performing 10% gone the end. And he wasn't big on innovation. He was big on imitation. He would say, if you take a look at other successful businesses and you adopt their best practices, eventually you yourself become one of the best businesses because you've adopted everybody else's best practices.